Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural INSA IC Summit. At INSA, our mission is to serve as a catalyst for public, private, and academic partnerships in order to identify, develop, and promote solutions to the national security challenges confronting the intelligence community. I think we can all agree that we have achieved the first part of that mission here at the IC Summit, as we've been able to assemble an audience of more than 500 professionals from across the public, private, and academic sectors, as well as an impressive list of more than 40 panelists and moderators from those same sectors. So I want to thank you all for being with us today. I want to extend a special thank you to all of our sponsors. In particular, I would like to recognize our two host sponsors, Northrop Grumman and Raytheon, for their continued support of our efforts. In addition to our host sponsors, I would like to thank Mantech for sponsoring the breakfast, Deloitte for sponsoring the registration, PwC for sponsoring our speakers lounge, BAE Systems for sponsoring our lunch, and Social Intelligence and Eagle Ray for sponsoring the morning and afternoon coffee breaks. Without your support, INSA would not be able to put on events such as this one today. I'd also like to thank our media partner, Defense One, for their support. Will you all please join me in a round of applause for our sponsors? We have a full agenda today. We have over 40 panelists participating across 8 breakout sessions, each on a topic of critical importance to the intelligence community. We have 4 key intelligence community leaders in the persons of Chairman Mike Rogers, who just arrived. Welcome, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Dutch Ruppersberger, DNI James Clapper, who will be with us later in the day, and DIA Director Mike Flynn. All of whom will share their vision for the future of our community and its mission. I encourage each of you to visit the Innovation Forum throughout the day, where companies doing great work within our community will be showing their innovative solutions and services. We have brought these key leaders together to facilitate this conversation, but it is through your participation and insight that progress will be made here today at INSA's IC Summit. When you registered, each of you received a copy of 2 white papers that INSA is proud to be rolling out this morning. Each will be a topic of discussion at breakout sessions later today. The first, Operational Levels of Cyber Intelligence, seeks to explore cyber intelligence as a disciplined methodology with understandable frames of reference in the form of operational levels. The paper, I'm going to go back and analyze that sentence later on today. The paper reviews methods for proactive cyber operations, including intelligent and dynamic defenses to combat actual threats by adversaries. The second, a preliminary examination of insider threat programs in the U.S. private sector, is an initial review and summary of current practices for cyber inside threat programs from across the entire private sector. Obviously, this is a timely topic. I think you'll find the paper's conclusions very interesting. I would also like to thank all of the volunteer members and leaders of INSA and our councils and task forces. Your time and effort have resulted in the ideas and white papers that provided the momentum for this and other INSA policy-focused events. Given recent events, it is no surprise that we have received a large amount of interest from the media. I would like to thank all of them for attending today, as we believe the American public should be well informed about the challenges the IC faces and the solutions that will be discussed here today. With that said, and let me add, before I do introduce our panel, the events in Syria, of course, and the whole issue surrounding WMD proliferation and the instability in the Middle East and South Asia and Sub-Sahara Africa is again a poignant reminder, especially as America's military posture lowers its profile around the world, as it has been doing for the last several years. Intelligence becomes that much more critical to the national security of the United States. So that's yet another reason that I believe this is a very, very timely conference indeed, and I know that we will all look forward to the insights of our panelists this morning. So with that said, I'd like to introduce our first plenary session of the day, The View from the Hill, featuring Congressman Mike Rogers, Chairman of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and Congressman Dutch Ruppersberger, Ranking Member of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Moderating the discussion is Fran Townsend, CNN National Security Analyst and Executive Vice President of McAndrews and Forbes Holdings. And as many of you remember, Fran was my predecessor as chairperson of INSA until last December. Prior to her time at INSA, Fran served her nation in many high-profile positions, culminating in her tenure as Assistant to the President from Homeland Security and Counterterrorism. Much of the groundwork for today's summit originated from Fran's time as chairwoman, and today's success is in large measure owed to her. So with those initial remarks, please join me in welcoming the members of our first panel this morning. Thank you.
Well, John, thank you very much for that kind introduction. Having served 3 years as the chairwoman of INSA, I am very proud. It's home week for me, so I'm very glad to be here. I'm going to do as most of you who know me, I am a zealot for time, so I'm going to try and get us back a little bit closer to schedule. I'm going to skip introductions. You know who the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee is, Mike Rogers, former FBI agent, Dutch Ruppersberger, who is the ranking member, is a former police officer. Both are long experienced hands in the intelligence community. I'm going to turn this over to each of them to make sort of some introductory remarks. Look, there's a lot to try and cover here. I've got my Twitter feed open. We're going to take questions from the audience. And there's been news that's even broken overnight, as has become typical, unfortunately, in the world of intelligence. Why don't we start, Congressman Rogers, with you? Why don't you open it up?
Great. Well, I won't talk long. I'm eager to get to the questions. Thanks for having us, Frank. Thanks. It's always good to see you. Ambassador Negroponte, great to see you as well. You know, there are significant challenges around the world, and there's a lot of things that keep Dutch and I up at night, but if you just go around the world quickly, in some of the rapid changes, things that we talk about a lot, and some things don't get much attention at all. So you see North Korea re-engaging in uranium enrichment, or at least threatening to do it. A country that just a few months ago threatened a nuclear exchange with the United States of America has very large chemical and biological stockpiles. Concerns us. They're certainly watching the events of the day. You have the Russian military is starting to reinvest in its technology. It launched some pretty sophisticated submarines within the last year or so. Hadn't really seen that since the early 1990s. Certainly Putin is eager to get back in the the game of influence around the world, as you've seen unfold. And of course, I don't know if you've read his New York Times editorial. It's good to get lectured by the guy who invaded South Ossetia not that long ago, right? Thank you, Mr. Putin. You know, and you look at where the Chinese are going, the cyber espionage is breathtaking and only getting worse, even after the public disclosures of its aggressive nature on cyber espionage. Military-style cyber planning is now a part of the framework of every major nation state, and unfortunately some that aren't major nation states are engaged in cyber military planning and using that technology around the world. China is, number one priority is to steal your intellectual property, repurpose it and pass it to its commercial use to compete illegally against U.S. companies. They're also very good on their cyber attack planning. They have it as a part of their mainstay. You know, a couple of interesting things China has done recently. Under the radar, they've announced that their oil platforms are now strategic assets and that they will defend them militarily. Changes the dynamic in the discussions in the South China Sea significantly. So you're seeing that tension with China and Japan even got one notch hotter recently. And by the way, what that means in their mind is, as they had told us before, they didn't want the U.S. Navy to be sailing in the South China Sea, a place we've been since we've been a country. 40% of the world trade goes through there. This is a new wrinkle that we're going to have to work through. They've also named their financial institutions all the way down to their ATMs as a strategic asset in China. That has business implications, number one, and it certainly has security implications for all of us, number two. Not to mention Al-Qaeda on the rise, and Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb. Clearly we see what is a huge destabilizing and growing more destabilizing event in Syria. Many call it a civil war. I think that is not accurate. I think this is a proxy war that has bled into the region in a significant way. And if we look at it as a civil war, we're going to make a lot of mistakes in decisions that we make. So those are just a couple of the things that we worry about at night. And there is more than that in the fact that we are working aggressively to publicly dismantle the National Security Agency that provides us information we need to keep America safe. Is mind-boggling to me. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about that as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to my friend Dutch, and we'll get to the questions.
Okay, well, thanks INSA and Fran for having us here. It's great to see everyone here involved in the intelligence community some way to talk about issues that are so important. You know, what do we do in intelligence? I believe strongly that intelligence is the best defense against terrorism, against cyber attacks, a lot of the issues that we deal with. What the intelligence community is made up of people, and people are so important. And the people in the intelligence community clearly are smart, they're focused, and they've also taken an oath to maintain the confidentiality of information. I guess Snowden didn't get that, but who knows. I think I talk a little bit about the committee because Mike has raised some of the issues. Our committee, we have the Senate and the House Intelligence Committees, as you know. For years, our committee just wasn't doing the job that they needed to do. There was a lot of partisan politics. I think David Ignatius from the Washington Post called our committee a snake pit. But when Mike and I took the leadership, we decided that the stakes were too high. We were going to work together as a team, and that's what we've done. I tell this joke, he's heard it 100 times, but you know, Mike is a former FBI agent. I was a former investigative prosecutor. All good FBI agents must listen to the prosecutor, even if we're in the minority. So I always remind him of that. But Mike and I, we disagree on things, but we always have come to a resolution. And I think a lot of it has to do with respect, relationships, and trust. That's the way really you should live your life. Now, where are we? We have a lot of issues that we're dealing with. Things are evolving. We're very concerned about the cyber issue. Mike and I pulled together. We decided we had to do something about our cyber attacks, and we brought in all different groups. We brought the ACLU together. We brought the White House. We brought the business community to try to find a way to deal with the issue of cyber. Very important, and we have to deal with that issue. We're getting attacked, as you know, every single day. Cyber Command estimated in the last 3 years, I think we've lost about $400 billion from trade secrets and information that mostly China, but other countries are getting. You know the issue of terrorism and how serious it is. It'll go beyond our lifetime, I'm sure, and we have to continue to use the best tools, do it legally, and find these individuals. I call it a needle in a haystack. The individuals that we're going after, the terrorists, the bad guys, they're the needle. And we have to find them, and we have to make sure we stop them before they attack us. It's our highest priority in the United States, and secondly, our allies. Very important issue, and we have to be diligent in that regard. You have the China-Russia threat, the cyber attacks, the issues that are happening over there. These are things that are evolving. So I can go on and on, like Mike raised some of the issues. I think, Fran, it's better if I stop talking and we listen to you all so we can answer your questions.
That's
Okay,
great.
sure.
Thank you both. And with your permission, I'm going to use first names. Is that okay?
That's a lot, but Reapersburg, are you kidding? That's why they call me Dutch. So,
Okay.
13
So
letters.
let's start with what is the news of the day. I think, Mike, you referred to it as a proxy war. I've called Syria has become the Vietnam of the 21st century for the same reason. You've got big regional players like Russia and Iran playing out a larger geopolitical game, if you will, at the expense of the Syrian people. Talk to us, both of you, about what is the likelihood that the Russian proposal goes, A, anywhere? Is it a credible, do you believe that there'll be a credible plan? And B, can there be any plan without the threat of military force if it fails?
Well, I mean, clearly, the Russians have been on the ground. I mean, first let's try to understand the problem if we can for a second. So the Russians have been on the ground since the beginning. They have long-term military contracts there. They've been supplying weapons before, during, and they want to do it after whatever happens in Syria. They really need that warm water port, Tartus. They need to keep that warm water port. So they have a strategic, they believe, a military strategic interest in keeping their footprint in Syria. So we should try to eliminate pretty quickly some benevolent interest in being the peacemaker in the region. They're concerned about losing a strategic asset. That's their number one primary concern. And by the way, they've been on the ground providing advisors, providing intelligence packages, and it's in their interest to probably make sure that if there's the first people who might show up at a chemical storage facility, I think the Russians want to be the first ones in the door. I imagine there's some Cyrillic writing in there that might cause them some concern. I'm just guessing. I don't know. The problem with Syria now, and why it can work, but our interests have to align, and so we have to push their interests to align. I believe you need a credible military threat in order to continue to have a negotiation success. I really do believe that, which is exactly why the Russians said that they would not allow that to happen in the United Nations. They take out Chapter 7, which would allow a United Nations military threat if we couldn't get a handle on these chemical weapons. I think they're buying themselves. They got exactly what they wanted on day one, which was time. They needed Assad to have more time. So this gives them time to dig in, to engage in denial and deception campaigns on the ground about their chemical weapons programs. It allows them to continue to supply arms, financing, and other things. And it sends a pretty dangerous message to the opposition that he's going to be there for a length of time. I'm skeptical. I hope it works. I just don't think it will work if we don't have some real credible threat to say, guess what? If this negotiation doesn't go well, we have a whole other set of options, and you're not going to like any of them. I worry that without that, we don't. This just becomes a game of taking 4 months to decide when to meet, 4 months to decide after that who gets to meet, another 6 months to decide who gets to go in to Syria, and that I don't think is helpful to what's happening on the ground there.
Dutch, do you agree that there needs to be this credible threat of military force?
Without a doubt. We are here because of the threat of military force. If you look at the history, when a lot of this started, when the opposition was starting to gain momentum, that is when Russia basically wanted us to come to the table and to see what we could resolve. Why does Russia do this? Well, the first thing, Putin will only do what's good for Putin, and then second, Russia. That's my opinion. And they know they're on the wrong side of the issue, especially as it comes to chemical weapons, but also their interest in Syria and the Middle East. That's about the only jurisdiction there that really works with Russia. So it was to their advantage. Then when Hezbollah got in the game, things changed. even though we know Iran was there. And they, at that point, said, we're winning. And that was why we decided to coordinate, no boots on the ground, but to be the quarterback to help the opposition and the other allies to try to at least help them somehow change the tide. And our whole goal then was to get Russia back to the table. Well, then we are in the position now, we know where we are. I think the president made the right decision because the only leverage we have now with the players that are there are force. Assad killed 100,000 of his people, women and children. I've met with Assad. I'm amazed. He's a low-key ophthalmologist that was trained in Great Britain. And yet I think his father's people in Iran are pulling all of his strings. But it's all about maintaining that kind of power. So I think we have to verify, trust but verify, and I think we need time limitations because if this is a stalling tactic, then we have to continue on with the threat of force or nothing is going to happen. That is our leverage. And also, we have to verify with the people that are going to go into the country. And how that's going to happen, that's going to be a tough situation. The country's still at war. Will the people who are going to check to see where the weapons are and if they're leaving it, are they going to be safe? These are things that we have to deal with.
So last night, while most of us were sleeping, The Guardian published only the most recent leaked document from Edward Snowden. It raises a whole bunch of issues for the intelligence community, public policy about leaks. This report alleges, at least, that the United States is passing U.S. person data to Israel. We have seen a hue and cry publicly about privacy issues and sort of an ongoing public debate in this country. This is only going to fuel it. Can you talk, each of you, a little bit about, one, what you think, if you've read the report, this Guardian article, what you think, and to the issue of leaks and privacy, and how do we get the American people comfortable and supportive of what their intelligence community really needs to be able to accomplish?
Great question.
Boy, look at the time.
Well, in fairness to Mike.
You want me to take this one? You want me to go first?
Yeah,
why don't you
sure.
think about what you're going to say? No. The first thing, there's always, I believe, a negative into a positive. And there's no question that this debate on privacy has to be out there because of the things that we're dealing with cyber laws and those type of issues. And it's very difficult when we're in the intelligence community to really let the public know a lot of what's going on because it's classified. Well, so much of that is kind of out there now because of what has happened with this leak. And if we're going to move forward, not only with the public, but with other members of Congress, we're going to have to somehow change some laws and be more flexible on the issue of what we're going to do and how we're going to deal with classified information. NSA is in my district. These are dedicated people who get up every morning and they work hard. They think they're helping their country, and they're getting hit pretty hard. And it has nothing to do with them. It's perception. But we in politics have to deal with the issue of perception, even though it's not reality. So Mike and I have been working closely with General Alexander and other people in the DNI intelligence community to try to find ways that we can get out more information, maybe after the fact, that won't violate sources and methods, to educate the people. Because if the people are concerned that NSA or someone else in intelligence is listening to them every day, there's going to continue to be a problem. And eventually there could be unintended consequences with Congress passing laws that might affect our national security. Now, I'm going to say something now that my staff will be very upset with. But I think it's important that we have to raise this issue. And this is about the media. And I want to make it really clear, so if I'm quoted, that I believe that the First Amendment is one of the most important things that we have to be there, we have to stand behind, we have to support the media's ability to write and to raise issues, and they are doing it now. And I don't have a problem with this debate and printing all of these issues that are out there. But what I do think is the media itself, I don't think it should be government or elected officials, the media itself need to come together and to see how far do we go when we're getting to beyond the debate on privacy, but more on printing sources and methods that will eventually kill, it will cause a death to Americans if we're attacked. And it's a very sensitive issue. So I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not going to be there. I mean, because I don't think we should. It's the perception. But I think when you get to the point that article after article talks about sources and methods, and it gives the Al-Qaeda the ability to dodge us. We won't be able to find where they are, or how they're going to protect us. So I just throw that out there. We're not doing anything about it, but I think the media itself. I remember as a former prosecutor, 10 years ago when I was on the Intelligence Committee, you would never see the information out there about sources and methods, and literally giving the Al-Qaeda and other groups the data on what we're trying to do to protect us. Because remember, what's this intelligence all about? What are the people who are working here? What are the millions of dollars that we spend? It's about trying to protect us. Intelligence is the best defense against terrorism. And we have to have the laws. We have more checks and balances than any other country in the world on what we do. And believe me, Mike and I both make sure that NSA or the intelligence community follows the law and it's constitutional. And if it's something wrong, then we'll try to fix it. So I better stop there. And staff, don't give me a hard time, but I just wanted to raise that as an issue.
Oh, keep going. That was good. This has been the most frustrating series of weeks, and candidly, the damage is growing by the day. There are certain things that the newspapers are publishing that has nothing to do with privacy issues, nothing. They're providing our adversaries valuable information. And by the way, we have already seen one Al-Qaeda affiliate completely change the way it does business, which means we now have a gap in our ability to try to stop something bad from happening. And it is, as has been described by senior intelligence officials, significant and irreversible. So we have just built in now, because we think it's fun to put this in the newspaper, and I think irresponsibly on some of these issues, we have a gap. And what's frustrating to us is our job was to try to find ways we could to close the gaps in our intelligence, working with our intelligence communities, that we knew existed prior to 9/11. Well, these programs, some of these programs which they talk about, fills those gaps. Well, guess what? Those gaps are back. And if we think for 1 minute that people don't perceive that when there is a gap that they won't take advantage of it, we are absolutely fooling ourselves. Al-Qaeda is on the rise in the Maghreb. Matter of fact, it has now become the largest single source of financing for the core Al-Qaeda leadership through kidnappings, by the way, ransom. You have Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula causing us great concern. Its capabilities are growing. There's some destabilization efforts underway. You also have new affiliates that are growing in interest in external operations, meaning U.S. targets or Western targets, along the Pakistani-Afghan border. You have new safe havens developing as the troop drawdown happens in Afghanistan in the northeast. You see Al-Qaeda actually talking about safe havens in Syria along the Iraq-Syrian border. So we have to put in context when we have these conversations about what we're disclosing first. Secondly, we spend most of the reports that get leaked are reported as they have found them doing something wrong. We have found this horrible thing that nobody knows about, and we're printing it. Part of what Snowden stole was slide decks of which described what was wrong and what the mitigation process was, which means we knew about it. These are management tools to fix problems that we have found in the system, which means the court has found some, the Intelligence Committee found some, and these are not, and here's the other problem. We used such specific language in describing these events. Every time it came out, people said, well, that's a privacy violation. It says it's a violation. No, absolutely wrong. They weren't privacy violations. Some of them were technical violations, and when I use the word violation, that's even wrong. It's just that the technology changes. Everybody knows about internet protocols. When something changes, there's going to be a little glitch in the system to catch up, right? That's a technical problem, not a privacy problem. Those are listed in there. The newspaper takes it and says, aha, let's describe this as a privacy violation, 2,796 or whatever they were saying. Most of those, this is what, you get my blood pressure up on these. Think of this. Matter of fact, Americans should be mad about this for all the wrong reasons that they're mad about it now. Most of those violations that were reported because there was lawful intercept of bad guys overseas. They were legitimately identified, legitimate targets, reasonable suspicion, all of that was found. Now, in the modern day of communication, you really don't know where that person is with that particular device at any time, right? And guess what? You can be a U.S. person for a temporary period of time being somewhere else by using U.S. networks. That's a confusing thing for a guy who's trying to catch a bad guy, right? But we all have legal implications on if somebody uses a U.S. network, even if they're a foreign person in a foreign place. These guys, we put a lot of pressure on these guys to make sure they do it right. We're the only intelligence service in the world, really, that self-limits the way we do. I can guarantee you Putin isn't having this conversation. So here's the thing. They get on the phone, the guy goes from Pakistan to Afghanistan to Dubai, catches a flight to New York City. Now, if we know this is a bad guy doing bad things, they're trying to figure out what is this person up to. They get to the United States. They don't necessarily know it. The person's phone has been off. They make a phone call. Now the analyst goes, oh, they're now in the United States. This ought to offend everybody in this room. I know it offends me. Guess what we have to do by law? Turn it off. Congratulations, you're in the United States. You're plotting a terrorist attack. We have to turn it off and then go through, try to find another system by handing it over to the FBI to develop the same kind of reasonable suspicion to turn it back on. So that is considered a violation. I got bad news for you. I don't think we ought to turn it off, right? But that's what the law is. Our job is to make sure that we make sure that that law is followed. So we are working against ourselves every day. And then when the newspaper picks it up, they're calling these violations. And if you're not familiar with this, doesn't it sound like a horrible, terrible thing that these people must be doing about violating somebody's privacy in the United States? That's what people believe, and we are working against ourselves. We are going to have a public outcry on an organization that follows the law. They self-report when they violate. The court challenges them frequently, and by the way, what you saw in there with that terse court exchange was the court working on technical corrections, right? You want that to happen. It shows you the oversight works. Instead, it's being portrayed as an agency out of control doing horrible, horrible things. And I'm telling you, it is costing us significantly in our ability to collect against our adversaries, and they know it. There's a reason Putin decided to put an op-ed in the New York Times. He knows that America is on a feeding frenzy against itself, and he would love to join in on the game. So when you hear it, I'm going to ask you all to be skeptical. This notion that the agency is collecting on U.S. persons and giving it to any foreign intelligence agency in the way it was described is completely wrong. That's not what is happening. I can't go into a lot of other detail, but I can guarantee you the privacy of Americans are protected in the way we operate. So part of the problem was we were actually too good, too aggressive in our oversight, and we documented it, and we talk about it with leadership in order to try to fix it. They stole that slide deck and put it out there and said, oh my God, we caught them doing something horribly wrong. We should dismantle the National Security Agency. I am really worried about where we're going here, and this growing sense of isolationism is concerning to me. And if we don't get ourselves right, and if we don't stop beating Americans up for being Americans, we are going to be in a lot of trouble when it comes to providing our intelligence services the tools that they need to protect this country. All right, I'm not all worked up about that at all, am I?
It's just getting the facts out. It's getting the facts. One thing, let me say about that. Mike has been criticized for standing up and giving the facts. And all we're doing, we oversee the intelligence community, and we do oversee, we hold them accountable, we do the budgeting, and we make sure they follow the law. But we also have to put the facts on the table. And when you get these allegations, like the metadata program, that we're listening to somebody without a court order, that's not the case. But we have to deal with the perception. And what some of the things that we're doing, I said it before, we're trying to make sure that we can declassify more information so that we can get people more information so that they know that we're always following the law, but we're also out there to protect the American people. And we're going to have more attacks. The head of Al-Qaeda has just said that he wants Al-Qaeda to start targeting more in the United States and our allies. And believe me, with what's happened with these leaks, we're more vulnerable because of that. We're going to lose lives because of these leaks and because of where we're going. So we have a lot to do. We ask you all to be there with us. Let's get the facts out. But we have a lot more to do also to communicate with the American public. And I hope we can do more in the declassification that will not affect sources and methods.
So you raise, frankly, what my next question
I kind of knew I
was
would.
gonna
That's
be.
why I wanted to.
Nice, thank you. Look, yesterday was the 12th anniversary of the horrific attack on September the 11th. And NYPD Police Commissioner Ray Kelly gave a series of interviews, one of which was on CNN, where he said, more than once, that he believes the threat to the homeland from al-Qaeda is as great, if not greater, than previous to 9/11. You can imagine, from my perspective, having been the President's Homeland Security Advisor, that got my attention. Agree or disagree, and what do you think is the greatest threat?
You want to start?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, al-Qaeda Corps is looking for a victory, and the greatest victory they can have by some event. What's concerning is that in the past, they were very eager to have big events, big 9/11 style events, and they would take a long time to plan those big, impactful events. Well, unfortunately, they learned a lot from the Boston bombing. And so now you see a change in attitude, and of course with the changing of the guard in leadership, with Zawahiri now taking the al-Qaeda Corps, you can see a change in the kind of things that they're doing for targeting and other things. What they think, now their definition of what they think might be a successful attack has changed. And that is very, very concerning to us. And so, again, our concern is, are we engaged fully in all the counterterrorism programs that we know was impactful with disruption in their leadership, their planning, their financing? And we've had some changes, right? We've had again, this public debate and thought about, well, maybe these things are bad things, so we'll slow down, we'll pull them back. Well, they're not pulling back. And what you're finding is, I mean, think about what's happening in Syria with the al-Nusra. There's over 10,000 members subscribed to al-Qaeda operating in the eastern part of Syria. And they're talking about locking off a safe haven. Where have we ever seen pooling of that large number of fighters, right? And guess what? They're coming from all over the world, including the United States of America, heading to jihad because they think they're winning the fight over on the east side. That is dangerous. And so now that you've got folks with European papers, you've got folks with maybe American papers who are trained. They have been further radicalized. And guess what? When this is over, whatever it looks like when it's over, they're going home. And al-Qaeda knows who they are. They know that they are a new avenue for providing strikes. So I think what the commissioner is talking about is the dynamic of the threat changed. You don't have to look for the big event, flying a plane into a building. They'd like to do that too. But we also have to now worry about those smaller knockoff events. I'm equally concerned, and I do think the threat is greater in that regard.
I agree with Mike. I think the real focus and what my concern is, and I think a lot of us, and Mike, you and I have had this conversation, is the lone wolf. I think al-Qaeda realized that we are very sophisticated in our allies in being able to find a major attack. So where they're attempting more out of Yemen, I think, than any other area, focusing on the United States and having individuals that are under the radar, not using phones, not doing things where we could pick things up. And that's, by the way, why it's so important for the intelligence community to work with state and local also, a team approach, get as much information as you can, anything that looks unusual out there. But this is what I'm concerned about. We had a couple of those attempts. We were lucky that some of those did not occur. But it's a serious world, and now I think you can't misjudge how many people are helping al-Qaeda and funding them. And you have some very smart people that are part of the organization. You have doctors that are trying to research, and they're putting plastic bombs in individuals so that they can go through the airports and not be detected. So this is very serious. Now we've been talking a lot today about Syria and about terrorism, but let's not lose sight of the cyber attacks. and how serious it is not only to our country on what we're being lost in money, but more importantly, how these attacks can affect us here in this country. Destructive attacks. It has been alleged, or the media reported, I can't say directly, but I know where it is, that Iran knocked out Aramco, the largest oil company for Saudi Arabia, knocked out 30,000 computers. When Russia, as reported in the media, went to attack Georgia, they cyber attacked them. They shut down their communication systems. And this is very serious, and it really concerns me. People say, Dutch, you and Mike are members of the Gang of Eight. What keeps you up at night? And I'll say, well, spicy Mexican food, and you know, weapons of mass destruction, including what we're talking about with the chemical, and cyber. And we have a long way to go to deal with the cyber issue. And not only just in the United States, and Mike and I worked hard. We got a bipartisan bill passed. I think it was 288 to 127, and the president was against our bill, but we were still able to get a bipartisan support to get our cyber bill passed. And I talk about giving Mike credit. We had a bill passed the session before that, and it didn't have as many votes. And I said, Mike, if we've got to get the White House behind this. We have to get the Senate. So we have to make changes, and we have to deal with the perception of privacy in our cyber bill. So we made a lot of changes, and Mike didn't like it, but he knew that the end game was getting the bill passed, because a lot of people on my side of the aisle felt very focused on the issue of privacy, as they should. And we got this bill passed. It's over in the Senate now, and it's still not going anywhere, but we're trying to work on that too. So let's not lose sight of that issue of cyber. It's there. It's not going away. And I wouldn't be surprised if a country like Iran, that's not that sophisticated, is attempting or looking to attack us right now, whether it's Wall Street or anything they can do to disrupt.
So I encourage you all. I'm going to start taking the questions both from the audience and from Twitter. It's at INSA Alliance on Twitter, or at Fran Townsend. Let's stick with cyber for a moment. There's this group called the Syrian Electronic Army. There are allegations that they are trained and backed by Iran. What is the policy and legal framework in which we can either defeat, deter, or offensively go back at them? And do we have what we need? What will it take to get the legislation through the Senate so we have legislation in this country?
You know, this Snowden thing is horribly unfortunate, because the misperception that it created around all of this is shocking. I mean, just how wrong 98% of it is shocking to me. And that hurt our ability. It slowed it down. It's not done. You cannot look at the threat matrix on what we're going through on cyber in this country. And any member that went through it, and one of the reasons I think so many members joined in, even despite the misgivings, was because of the sheer volume and level and sophistication and growing danger of these cyber threats. So there are public reports that Iran is already attacking our financial institutions by lower level DDoS attacks that are concerning. They're looking for weaknesses in our system. Remember, they're not a rational actor. They believe that they have the right to attack us in cyber. And that threat is growing. The E-Army is real. We believe that it has more than just Iran providing a little advice and counsel on how a cyber attack against the United States might look. They're not going to be bashful about doing it. And so I don't think our policies are exactly right yet. Our defensive capability is a problem here. Most governments, Iran runs the internet. In America, it's a private sector run, as it should be. But remember, if we go over, and I always say if you're going to punch your neighbor in the nose, best to hit the weight room for a few months first. Yeah, you know what I'm talking. You've seen my neighbor, haven't you? Here's the problem. So if we go over with an offensive strike, they're not going to necessarily come back at government targets. They probably will. But they're also going to go back at private sector targets. And there is still huge vulnerabilities in our private sector system. So without some opportunity, we think that we've found that way by sharing in real time threat source code information, and it has to be in real time, hundreds of millions of times a second, that we can at least give our private sector the ability to protect themselves from what might be coming. That's our disadvantage, and that's why this is so important we get right. And it's so frustrating that with this is the largest single threat that we know exists and is happening today that we're doing nothing about. that's troublesome. And so we're going to continue talking. We've had great conversations with the Senate. They haven't given up on it. We think that we'll make a few changes and maybe, hopefully, by the end of this year, get a bill sent to the president's desk. That is our hope and our goal, and we haven't given up on that.
We have to educate the American public. What we need to say to the public first, 80% of the network in the United States is controlled by the private sector. So the private sector has to be very much involved in a partnership with the intelligence community and with government to make sure that we put the proper protocols in to protect us. And we also have to deal with the issue of privacy, and we will. And Mike and I both were in law enforcement. We know that you must follow the law. And when we put this bill together, we brought the ACLU and other groups to the table. And we thought, and a lot of the changes that we made on our second bill were based on the recommendations. And it's still where we have some pushback, so we have more work to do. But it is one of the most serious threats that we deal with. We have a 1947 law that basically says we cannot give classified information to the other side. That's why right now our intelligence community can't really communicate, and they see all of these attacks coming in and putting it into the private sector unless there's some type of classified program that is there. We're trying to change this. We're trying to make sure it's information sharing, that we can go back and forth, and believe me, it's all voluntarily, and we're not violating privacy. So please help us. And I can say this, the business community have really stood up and made a lot of concessions to try to get the bill passed because they know how serious it is. And let me throw this out, and I'll stop then, Fran. We have lost $400 billion. What does that relate to in jobs? In the United States. And we have to not only deal with the cyber issue in the United States, but we've got to get China and say, if you want to be a big boy, grow up and work with us. You can't keep stealing all of this information. And it's going to be has to be a global issue and global standards as we relate to cyber if we want to protect ourselves.
Well, you're gonna really be happy for the next one. So at Mike Godfrey on Twitter reminds me, yesterday was also the 1-year anniversary of the tragedy of the attack on the Benghazi consulate. Chris Stevens was a dear friend. I had been with him not 10 days before. The question from Mike Godfrey is, when are the American people going to actually hear from those people who were at the Benghazi consulate, the American employees, this is to Congressman Rogers. When are we going to hear from them?
Hear from the employees
the
themselves.
witnesses, right? The people who were there on the ground who can speak to what happened.
We have, in our committee, we're doing the intelligence lane of that investigation. We've had 10, will be next week our 10th hearing. We have talked to all but I think 3 now on the ground. And so we're still working through those issues. For those who are looking for something, we tracked down every lead that we heard. And so every story that you read in the newspaper about something bad that the agency was gun running or doing, we ran all of those to ground thoroughly with our investigators. Our goal was to try to find out exactly what happened. So now we've got it narrowed down, at least in our lane, that there are some indicating that the time frames that their headquarters is giving might be different than the time frame that the folks on the ground are giving. We're trying to reconcile that. We need to do a lot of this in a classified setting, mainly because the folks are still employed. Most of them still are undercover, and they're great patriots. They went through a pretty difficult circumstance and dusted themselves off and redeployed around the world. So our goal here is not to disrupt their ability to continue to protect America and do this investigation in a way that treats those folks who are candidly patriots with the respect that they deserve. So we're working it. As an old FBI guy can tell you, these things always take longer than you think they do. I think the State Department is where you'll get the first set of more public hearings on the investigation from the lower end as it works up through the senior ranks. Those are where the decisions were made not to provide extra security. Those were the decisions were made, and I saw an article the other day that said that the agency was supposed to vet the security services. I can tell you that in our investigation, let me just put it this way, the agency wouldn't hire the people that they hired. that the agency would not co-locate on the facility as late as that August because they believed it was not supportable in defensive positions. So somebody took that information and made some really dangerous decisions. That's where the problem was on what happened on Benghazi that day.
Dutch, I have a question for you from the audience. You spoke very highly and about your esteem for the people in the intelligence community. We're going through a period of sequestration. We remember budget cuts in the intelligence community back in the 1990s that very much gutted the human intelligence, the clandestine service. What do you see as the impact of sequestration on the intelligence community, and what is the committee in its oversight role going to do to protect the capability and not prevent loss?
Well, to begin with, sequestration is a slow burn. It makes us weaker as a country, whether it's the military, whether it's intelligence, and a lot of what we do in intelligence, I mean, we have satellites, we have equipment and resources, but it's about people. And so what we're trying to do on the committee right now, Mike and I had an amendment, and we're attempting to work with his leadership on the issue of sequestration to say, as it related to the intelligence community, that, you know, this across-the-board cut with everything is just disastrous. And budgeting is about priorities. Budgeting is about picking your priorities. There are some programs you might like, but you can't afford it. But what you do well, you do it 100%, especially dealing with the issues that we deal with. So what Mike and I tried to do was to get them to give us a waiver in intelligence, like we've done in some areas in the armed services area, in the military area, and to get that waiver so that we will not be negatively impacted. And as it turned out, we couldn't get it past the Rules Committee. So it's a serious issue. You know, enough is enough. I mean, there's no question that we have to deal with a deficit, but you have to do it pursuant to a plan. And what we have to do is leadership has to get together, and I hear they're getting together today, Republican and Democratic leaders, to talk about how we're going to deal with sequestration. The message is out, folks, that we have to deal with a deficit, but let's do it the right way, pursuant to a plan. And right now, I can tell you this, Speaker Boehner is working hard. He's trying to resolve it. But at this point, you know, you can't get the votes. It's just like what happened when we voted on the debt ceiling. And by the way, the debt ceiling is money that we have authorized in Congress. There's no more money. But to use that as a leverage just can't be done. So I would think with all of the issues that are out there, the Syria issue, and the Al-Qaeda issue, the Russia-China issue, the cyber, all the things that we're dealing with as a country, I would think right now this might help bring us together. Because I can say this, and I appreciate it, Mike. I mean, Mike and I have a very unique relationship. We're probably the only bipartisan committee on the Hill, and people know it on both sides of the aisle because they tell us that we do that. And we're out there. Mike and I were able to cut $1 billion because we all have to do our thing, so to speak. But the way we did it, we looked at each program. We went to the heads of the different agencies and said, look, we've got to cut like everyone else, but let's negotiate it. Let's look at it, and let's not come across the board. And so it's working where we are now. But if we're okay for this year, but the next budget round, if this continues on, we're going to be in deep trouble. We'll be weaker as a nation. We won't be able to protect our citizens. And also, let's not forget about education issues and medical issues and those type of things also.
Okay, last question. This is an audience question to Mike Rogers. Given the dispersal of Syria's chemical weapons, is it feasible, one, to be able to get them under international control? And two, can you do that without U.S. boots on the ground?
Well, you know, the decisions, if we would have made them 24 months ago, looked a lot better. The options looked a lot better 24 months ago. They looked a little less better 18 months ago. They look pretty awful today. I do think that you are going to get, well, here's the problem. So it depends on how aggressive the Russians are at helping, I think. And by the way, Hezbollah is there in fairly significant numbers on behest of Iran that also wants to get their hands on these chemical weapons. So we do think that there's going to be some dispersal or further dispersal of the chemical weapons. I do think that you can get a good percentage of them because Assad regime is also worried that these things fall in the wrong hands and get used against his regime. And so you have a lot of, our interests have aligned, maybe not for all the right reasons, but our interests have aligned in trying to secure these stockpiles. I think it can happen. And we can get rid of sarin gas now. You know, in the old days, it was a much more complicated process. New technology would mean you could get in and do a lot of destruction in a short period of time in a way that's safe and final, especially on sarin gas. Mustard gas and other things still going to take longer. You got to build incinerators to burn them. I think it can happen. I don't think we need U.S. boots on the ground. Here's the one option that we have left on the table, and we'll tell you, Dutch and I travel there frequently and meet with our Arab League partners. I mean, they're frustrated, but I think that they're willing to provide the support that we would need, including troops, to go in and help secure those weapon systems, because they know how dangerous it is if it proliferates around the Levant. So we have lots of really good options to bring in our Arab League partners. They do want U.S. leadership at the table. They'll tell you that every time they go. And that's important. So I kind of hope we shake ourselves out of this melees and the administration kind of regroups about how we can impact that with a plan that's meaningful, which embraces our Arab League partners who are eager to do it, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Jordan on the Arab League partners. Turkey is also interested, I think, in participating. I think that's the best way to do it. I keep hearing these plans of 70,000 troops on the ground. If you were going to go in for a hostile takeover of those chemical weapons facilities and hold them, yes, it takes 70,000 people. I don't know anyone that's on our committee, Republican or Democrat, or in any of the national security committees, has ever talked about the real feasibility or even the interest in trying to have 70,000 U.S. troops. That's nuts. It's a horrible decision, and I think people who are trying to change the narrative are trying to say, well, this is going to require big troops, and there are lots of other options left, including, by the way, a surgical strike that could degrade their ability to deliver them if we needed it. And I think people who are saying that can't be done are not looking at all the facts on the ground. There's still, even with the notification, I wish we hadn't had a public discussion about what missile leaves what ship and goes to what place. I think that's not helpful. I don't know, if I were Assad, I would look at those and call those clues. I mean, we have to get back to just saying we've got the ability, we can degrade the system, and we'll leave it at that. So I do think there's a way forward here. But I'll tell you, the United States, if we allow this to happen, I worry about where we're going on this. I know the Koreans or the North Koreans are certainly eager to watch us fall on our face. I certainly know the Iranians, who, by the way, about a year ago tried to kill the Saudi ambassador by blowing up a restaurant with U.S. persons in it and didn't care about collateral damage. Now, if we don't think that sends a message about where their head's at, well, we better wake ourselves up here. They are eager to cause us harm, and some notion that they're not is fooling ourselves. DOD, I think, had a pretty good report recently about 600 U.S. soldier deaths attributed to, at least in some way, assistance from Iran. By the way, some of that through Syria. So it's some notion that this is an isolated incident. We cannot use limited U.S. leadership as well as resources, I think, is a major mistake as we look forward to what the world's looking like here in a few years.
Two great patriots, two fabulous public servants. We are lucky to have you to serve this nation.
Would you come
Please
home and
help
tell my
me. Thank
district
you.
that?
Yeah,
please?
yeah.
I'm happy. Anytime. Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Thank you for attending the opening session of the INSA IC Summit. Please proceed to your breakout sessions in the Maryland and Virginia rooms.